Welcome to part 2 of the Dharma Yoga website. In part 1, we downloaded these starter files, so just make sure you have index.html and style.css open in your text editor. So let's start by going over a few of the things at the top of the document in the index.html file. So we have the document type HTML, then the language is English. Inside of head, the first thing is our character type, which is UTF-8. And then we have a little note for Internet Explorer to use the latest version, which is IE Edge or Internet Explorer 11. And then we have the device with initial scale 1 for mobile. And then below that our title, which is Dharma Yoga, Connect with Us. So let's take a look at the title at the top of the browser here where the tab is. So here's where the title displays from an HTML document. Now let's go back and take a look at some of the other file extensions. So the first one we'll check out here is this CSS style sheet for the jQuery image slider called BX slider. So you'll find that inside of the CSS folder here. It's called jQuery.bxslider.css. Now let's go back, and I'm going to get rid of this file here, this navigation CSS. Don't worry about that, you don't need it. I've included the navigation CSS inside of the style sheet that you downloaded. So the next thing that we will check out are the font files here. So we're going to be using a really cool plugin called Font Awesome that displays awesome icons such as these and the social media icons at the bottom of the website. So now let's go back and drop down to the next thing, which is just going to be the fave icon. So if you're not familiar with fave icons, you've probably seen them. These are the little icons that display next to the titles of websites. So we have the little icon up top here, which is already uploaded to the web. And by the way, you don't need any of the pictures that we use here because they're all uploaded and will be at a similar file extension to the icon there. Now below are the navigation and image slider jQuery files, which you will find in the jQuery folder. And as you can see, I've left the image folder empty so you can add your own images. All you need to do is really check out the size of the images by going to the URL that we use for the images in their relative place on the website. Okay, so make sure that you have the index.html sheet open in your text editor, and let's get started with the first tag. So inside of the body section, what we're going to do first is add a wrapper. So the wrapper will include everything in our web page. So you just want to write an HTML note here, which won't display on the website, and we'll call it Start Wrapper. So in these, you can really write whatever you want. It's up to you. This is just to make it easier later when you're sorting through the HTML when there's a whole lot of stuff on the page. So let's write div ID wrapper for the wrapper, and then let's drop all the way down to the bottom of the HTML document to add the wrapper just above the body tag. So you can go ahead and paste it or write it out if you like and change it to end wrapper. And then close the div, and I'll add a tab here. Then what we'll do is start with our head section inside of the wrapper. So the next thing that I'll write is start header. And header is just plain header in HTML5. We don't need to use a div or divider for the header. And then you can write a note to end the header, or a comment. They're really called comments. I typically call them notes, so I caught myself there. So inside of the header, we're going to have the logo and the little callout section here with the phone number and address. So let's just double check that we have the index.html file open and write a little text here inside of the body section. So there we have the CWCW text. Let's get started inside of the header here. Now typically, well, let's start with the div ID callout, and then I'll explain why we're doing the callout section first rather than the logo. So you just want to write div ID callout and then close the div. So the reason that we do the callout section first, which is on the right, is because it appears first at the smallest scale of the website. So if we size the website down, you'll see that the phone number and address, and then just the phone number, is going to appear above the logo. So if you're designing just for a full width website, you want to do left to right, just as you would reading a sheet of paper, a book. But when you're designing for a responsive website, you want to do whatever appears first at the smallest scale of the website. So after the callout section, or inside of the callout section, what we'll do is add our first heading tag. So we're going to use the heading 2 tag. If you're not familiar with heading tags, there's heading 1 being the largest, all the way down to heading 6 being the smallest. So let's use the little phone icon here in HTML, which is the ampersand, pound, or hashtag, whatever you want to call it, 9742, semicolon, and then the phone number 555.525.5005, which I hope isn't a real phone number because I made that up. And then let's drop down and add the address. So this is going to be inside of a paragraph tag. Paragraph tags are simply P, and that will display just regular text until you style it. So let's just remind ourselves what we're going to write here. It's going to be 530 Street Road, Solana Beach, which is where I decided this yoga place is going to be. I think that's a pretty cool vacation destination if you're looking for somewhere to go. And it's going to be in, as I said, Solana Beach, California. And let's double check the zip. So the zip 92075. Okay, so if we go back over to our document and refresh, we have our address here. So now let's go ahead and add the logo, which will have a link around the logo. So you just want to drop down below the callout ID, and we'll create one more ID which will include the header section. This is simply going to be div ID logo. So go ahead and start and close the logo ID, and then inside of that we're going to start with a link. Links in HTML are the A tag. So we'll write ahref, and then you want to put the URL that you're linking to. In our case, it's the same page that we're on right now. So it's going to be index.html, and then you can close the link. So if you want to play around with the link, you can just add a little text in here and save it. And then if you come by, it will turn into a hyperlink, as you see here. So now let's go ahead and add the logo image. So to remind ourselves, here is the Dharma logo image we're going to add. Now all of the image URLs are going to start with this same extension here. So you can go ahead and just copy and paste that if you like. But first, we'll start with the image tag. So we just want to write image source or img src, and then add the URL, which is going to be uploads/yoga_logo.png, and then close the quotation and the image tag itself and refresh. And here's our logo, and then if we hover on top of it, you'll see that it turns into a pointer telling us that it's a hyperlink. Okay, so the next thing that we'll do is drop down below the header comment or note, and we'll add a little div class called clearfix. So you just want to write div class clearfix, and then close the div. So later in the CSS, we're going to style this, and we'll give it a CSS style called clear both. So when you use the CSS style called clear both, you could also use a CSS style called clear after, whatever it is, whatever the element is that you're styling. It will create some separation below that, like across the entire document, before you go on to the next element. So the next thing that we'll do below the clearfix is add something that we'll call banner wrapper. So inside of the banner wrapper, we're going to have the navigation and the image slider. So everything right here is going to be inside of the banner wrapper. So let's add a comment and write start banner wrapper. And then way down below the image slider is where we're going to end the banner wrapper. So you just want to drop down right below the slider, end slider, yet before the closing div for the wrapper, the regular wrapper, and write end banner wrapper. And then under end slider, that's where we'll close the wrapper div for the banner. But first, let's start it. So you want to write div ID and banner wrapper in quotations, banner dash wrapper, and close it. And then we can drop down below the end slider comment or note and close that div. Okay, and then inside of the banner wrapper, the first thing that we'll have is the navigation. So we'll actually want to drop down below the script source files for the jQuery to start the navigation. So the navigation already has the jQuery and CSS built in from the starter download that you received or downloaded. All we need to do is write the HTML out. So let's start with a div class that's going to be called nav wrap or nav wrapper. So just write nav dash wrap and then drop down and close the div class out. And then embedded in our nav wrap, we'll have a nav class. Nav, by the way, is the HTML5 tag for navigations. So we'll call this nav class navigation. And close the nav. And then embedded in the nav, we'll have a div class called nav. And nav menu style, which this is, you'll only realize that this is referencing the jQuery. This won't come up in the CSS really. So nav menu style yoga. So we don't really need to worry about the jQuery or the CSS. Then inside of the div class nav, we'll have an unordered list, which is UL, called UL class nav menu. And inside of the unordered list, we'll have list items. And if you're unfamiliar with unordered lists, you have unordered lists and then list items, or you could have an ordered list with list items. But you need to have the list items open and close within an unordered list that also opens and closes. So when you just have an unordered list and list items, they'll appear as bullet points. Okay, so now we'll just reference the HTML pages of the website. So the first is going to be index.html. That's for the home link, which we're already on. And then if we refresh, we have our first navigation item. So what we're going to use a list item class called active that the CSS will tell it to display as underlined. So in the CSS for the navigation, the active class tells the list item to display underlined. So if we go ahead and refresh, you'll find that it will stay underlined. And then when you're making multiple pages for the website, you just want to change the class active to whichever page it is relative to the navigation list item. So if you drop down and add the second list item, we'll write about us. So you just want to write about-us.html for the About Us page. And then write About Us in the link text. And then refresh, and we have our second list item. What I'm going to do is speed this up a little bit. I'm just going to copy and paste this a few times and then change the URLs here per page. So after About Us is classes and then testimonials, and last contact.html. So now if we refresh, we haven't changed the title. So we have all About Us pages. Let's go ahead and change the classes testimonials, and contact. So classes, testimonials, contact, and then refresh. And here is the navigation, looking very similar to the finished product up here. Okay, so let's go ahead and drop down some, and we'll go over to the image slider. So you just want to start with this little space in between the script source and script type here, and we'll just add a few classes to reference the images for the image slider here. So let's get started with our image slider by adding the first class underneath the jQuery for BX slider. This is going to be called div class slider. So just write div class slider, and then we can close that div below. So close the div, and then we're actually going to nest it within another div class. So let's call this one div class slide wrap. So slide dash wrap. And then close that div. And then we'll add an unordered list class that we'll call slider1. And then go ahead and close the unordered list. And then we'll add our list item similar to the unordered list in the navigation, but in this case our list items will contain the images for the slider. So let's start our first list item here, and we're gonna need 3 list items, so might as well get them set up. And inside of each list item will be an image. So that'll be image source, and then we can go up top and grab this URL up to yoga from the start for the first picture in the image slider. So go ahead and paste that URL, and it's going to be yoga_girl.png. Okay, and then if we refresh, we'll have the first image for the image slider. So here it is, and then below and to the left we have the previous and next buttons, which aren't set up yet. We'll do that in the CSS later. So you can go ahead and just copy this if you like, or you can add another image source tag. So drop down and add image source, and then we'll add the second image, which will be http://www.w3newbie.com/uploads/yoga_tree.png, and then close that image tag out, and let's go ahead and refresh and see our second image show up. So right now we We don't really want to operate the previous and next button, so let's just wait for it to appear. And here it is. Here's the second image with the tree. So our last image will be the beach shot. So go ahead and add the last image source for the slider and write yoga_beach.png and refresh. Okay, so if we just wait a second, they should revolve through all three images. So there's the third image with the beach and the person with the surfboard. And we have our navigation, image, and header complete now. Okay, so that about does it for part 2. In part 3, we'll go over the 3-column section, the 2-column section here, and then another 3-column section below. So we're going to go over the main sections of the page in part 3. I will see you there.